Hi, so I'm somewhere in Suffolk, not far from Lackford Lakes over that way, near West Stow, and I'm waiting to interview a guy called Jonny Rankin. Jonny Rankin is better known as Dubstep on the his Twitter handle, and he's coming here to talk to me today about the money he's raised for Operation Turtledove. He chose the location, and I turned up and parked probably about 300 yards that way, and I went for a short walk just along the tree line down there and got a very sort of short snippet of a turtle dove calling, and clearly that's why Johnny's chosen this area. So I've come back around and I've come up here, and the turtle dove sang a little bit more, hasn't sung since, still isn't singing, but it was sat in these trees behind me. So I saw it from a bit further down the path. I've got a really terrible photograph of it, which I'm going to put up just as proof. But somewhere just in these trees here is a turtle dove. So it's just something I can tell Johnny when he gets here. I, for one, am made up because that's my first turtle dove of this year. So thanks, Johnny. Hi, and welcome to this, which is the first of the Talk Wildlife interviews that I'm actually doing in the field. With lockdown being eased a little bit, I've come out and met up with Jonny Rankin. People will know him much better as Dubstep, and I'm going to have a chat with Johnny in a second. Hiya Johnny, how you doing?
All good.
Excellent. So I'm going to have a chat with Johnny. I just thought I'd introduce him first. And what we'll do is we'll talk about Dubstep, why Dubstep, what Dubstep does, what Dubstep's made, and all the rest of it in a fraction of a second. So Johnny, the wind beat us, we've moved.
Yeah.
It wasn't the fact that I kept getting distracted by the white throat.
Yeah.
So, let's start talking about Dubstep. First of all, why did you call it Dubstep?
Yeah. Dubstep was a play on dubstep, basically a type of music that I don't know anything about or listen to.
Right, well, just good a reason as any.
Yeah.
So, when you were sitting there and you thought, I need a name, where did that come from? How did something that you have no interest in, no knowledge of, suddenly become the name that you were going to play with for Dubstep?
When you put it like that, it sounds ridiculous. It was a chat with, I can't remember, maybe with Rob Yaxley and other people who were involved on the first Dubstep. And yeah, it just sort of came out. I think just generally wordplay without any knowledge of wordplay, like of what we were playing with.
Yeah, right, there you go then. So you might have seen Johnny on Twitter as Dubstep. He's also got a great YouTube channel, highly entertaining. I would recommend going and having a look at some of his videos, especially when the dog turns up. The dog's a star. You just see the door opening next to him and you know the dog's on its way in. The dog's not here with us tonight. Yeah.
No, she's too geriatric to come out here anymore, bless her. But yeah, she just terrorised me at home.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. That's all right then. So, tell us a bit about birding. How did you get into birding?
Yeah, basically, my granddad lived with us as we grew up, and he had sort of like a full ceiling-high window from his room, looking over just like the garden and woodland, and he'd point out, yeah, birds, wildlife, anything really. He was an all-round naturalist, to be honest. And my dad also was a keen birder, sort of from a scientific background, studying zoology and taking commissions to do various studies after his doctorate, his PhD. And don't know much about that. I need to ask him at some point.
No, that's fine.
But I know he studied waders and breeding waders on Rockcliffe Marsh and other places. So yeah, I was just literally indoctrinated from an early age by family members.
Yeah.
I wouldn't honestly say back then that I viewed it as birding. It was just something that we did. Pardon me. It was only really more formalised into birding when I moved here to East Anglia, and fell in with bad company like Robert Yaxley, and went more traditional birding around all these wicked places we've got around here.
Yeah.
Suffolk, Norfolk coast, and then locally here in the forest, and at wildlife trust reserves like Micklemere and Lackford Lakes nearby. You get a good passage, nothing remarkable to compete with your Titchwells and Ninsmere, but enough to keep me happy and basically massively increase my burden since I moved here 14 years ago, I think it was.
Yeah, I love Lackford. Lackford's a great place.
Yeah, it's cool, yeah. Much busier than it used to be. Not that I've been for a good while.
Yeah.
But I can still go out to social hours and enjoy it, yeah.
And so you're a birder, and what came first? Did you see the plight of the turtledove and decide to raise money, or did you make a decision to make money for birds and choose the turtledove? Which came first?
It was definitely turtledoves. It was Operation Turtledove that we wanted to fundraise for, and initially doing your traditional stuff the people's grandma literally do on the weekend, like a half marathon, a bird race, whatever. Felt that was quite limited in the impact we could have. So from doing my first half marathon in 2013, then I wanted to have that bigger impact, and then went to the first Dubstep, just a great spot. Went to the first Dubstep and doing that 300-mile walk with daily distances of 25 miles, and that had the desired effect. That had the interest and the uptake we wanted, and was obviously a proving ground for endurance. I didn't know I could walk that far and that many days in a row. Pretty well, surprising to me at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that was the first fundraiser you did, was it?
Well, the first fundraiser we did was we did a bird race, I think, in 2012 locally.
Right.
It's got a bit of traction and a bit, like 100 or 200 pounds. Similarly, maybe 100, 200 half marathon that I did over in Wales on Anglesey. But again, it wasn't having the impact I wanted, even though for me, at the time, a half marathon was mental. Mental. Going from heavy drinking, smoking, all the trappings of heavy metal, all the intoxicants you could think of, to then, running and that kind of output. That was pretty steep learning curve. But yeah, obviously people didn't appreciate that. They just thought, half marathon, me nan did one, whatever. Yeah. And that's where I needed to sort of escalate it to the point that we had something approaching the impact we were after. Yeah.
And how much money have you raised so far for Operation Turtledove?
Yeah, it's 19,000 and counting. We're going to do a domestic effort this year with a view to tipping it over 20k raised in 2020. That's probably not going to happen.
No, I doubt it.
Because I had swimming lessons last November, and I'd been practicing swimming after that. But the pool's been closed since mid-March, and I haven't got like a wetsuit or anything to do outside swimming, and nor am I possibly proficient enough to have a crack at it.
Right, okay, so hold on, stop there. So you walked from Thetford up to, was it
Saltholm?
Saltholm, yeah, right, okay, so you did that. Okay, yeah. That's walking, right, fine. Highly commendable, couldn't do it myself. And then you've done other bits and pieces, and now you have just learnt to swim.
Yeah.
And you're going to do something swimming. So is this going to be something that is, see how long I can swim before I drown, or what are you actually going to swim?
Yeah, so people do like a race called an Ironman.
Really? Yeah.
And it's like 2.4 mile swim. Is that right? Yeah, 2.4 mile swim, 112 or something mile cycle, marathon. So we did Thetford to Spurn cycle last September, well in excess of it was a 163 mile cycle, not 112. And then there wasn't sufficient daylight hours for me to then run a marathon. I could have done it in the dark, to be fair. But so we went to bed and I did the marathon the next day. So I'm relatively confident that I could cycle that distance and run a marathon.
Right.
But I don't know, well, I couldn't swim in October, November. I sort of did like a breaststroke thing. with my my head out the water like a seal. And then I had actual lessons and got like a hat and goggles to do the proper front crawl. I was practicing steady away at least 2 times a week with a view to come April, May now, doing outdoor swimming, doing proper open water swimming. Open water swimming is now been allowed, but you've got to have an amount of experience that I probably don't have, and amount of practice, and I don't own a wetsuit. So that's still a work in progress, to the point that it would threaten an effort this year, basically.
Yeah. So all of this sort of raising money, is it there? Just so you understand the reason why
just done it.
Jonny keeps checking down there, apart from there's plenty of birds around here, is that when we first arrived we had a turtledove calling and sitting on a tree just behind my shoulder. So I'm more than happy for Jonny to keep his eye on that, because it's my first of the year, as I mentioned. So I'll keep looking out for that.
Not there at the moment.
No. Right, but seeing as we're talking about Turtledove, and we've talked about sort of the money you've raised and how you've raised it. So give us a little bit of background about the Turtledove. Clearly we know it's in trouble.
Yeah.
So tell us what you know about sort of the bird and its conservation efforts.
Yeah, so it's a species in a UK context that's in pretty well in free fall decline. There's a couple coming. Yeah.
We're in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the forest.
Yeah.
We've moved because of the wind, and so far we've had a Land Rover, 2 people and 2 motorbikes, and a dust shower. So we're doing all right.
We're back in the room.
We're going to do it. In fact, somebody should have sponsored you for doing this interview. So,
so yeah, basically, in a UK context, there's a very real chance that turtledove would become extinct as a breeding species. So, 90%, 98% decline in breeding numbers. Issues around disease, habitat loss, change in farming practice. They're probably now single brooded as opposed to double brooded. There's a 50% reduction in productivity from, say, the 1970s there alone. And there's just a very demonstrable contraction in range and reduction in numbers. So even here in Suffolk, it's not readily recorded on breeding bird survey squares in the way it used to be. And that's just the way of this species in this country. And then you look further afield, issues on migration. I mean, just the arduous distance in itself, hunting along that flyway, habitat loss, increasing populations in sub-Saharan Africa, more land take to feed that population, and their own change in practices as they increase as a population and evolve. So really at every part of its life cycle, turtledove is facing issue.
Yeah, and that 98% figure is a huge figure. It's a worrying figure, and if it continues, it's likely that, I would say, within a decade the turtledove will be extinct as a breeding bird in the UK. That's only my opinion. It's not based on science. It's something dramatic needs to be done. So Operation Turtledove, that is a partnership between who?
Yeah, a partnership between, I would say it's probably RSPB led, but a partnership between the RSPB, Natural England, Conservation Grade, and Pensthorpe. Pensthorpe, the visitors centre, the visitor attraction, but also the Conservation Trust. So yeah, it is a partnership, and Operation Turtledove sits within the RSPB at some level, broadly with migrants and efforts to help our farmland birds as well. But yeah, very much a science-based approach. So research to understand issues that are affecting our turtledoves. So for example, monies that we've raised have gone towards research on the wintering grounds, issues affecting birds when they're not with us, just a blackbird, issues affecting birds when they're not with us, for the 2/3 of the year that they aren't, issues of disease, transference of that disease, if there's, for example, optimal feeding densities on supplementary feeding plots to avoid disease transference in birds. So that's the sort of research that we've supported, as well as satellite tracking over the years. And then we've just supported habitat creation. So, for example, the first effort produced 9 hectares of turtledove plot in the eastern region at a time when we were sort of between and coming to the end of agri-environmental schemes and funding. So it gave Operation Turtledove a purse to deliver on the ground supplementary habitat for turtledoves. The last effort we did was solely for the North Yorkshire Turtledove project, for the population, that most northerly population in that national park. And again, that was habitat creation and planting and feeding, which has been it's been instilled, it's been established on the ground. So these birds that are coming in now, they've got additional areas for feeding, hopefully get them into breeding condition quicker, bolster that northerly population, and maybe expand it, join up the eastern, maybe Lincolnshire and Yorkshire populations, even get turtledoves back up in County Durham, where I first saw them at Herworth Burn Reservoir. But dare to dream, but the point is that it's science based, and that's why we could readily support it, and that's why you can push very, very hard in support of that as an effort, as well as the fact that turtledoves for me are a flagship. So when I'm talking about turtledoves, I'm talking about all our farmland birds that are in decline. I'm talking about other migratory species that use that same flyway and suffer the same issue. So it's a conduit for probably the frustrations that we all have when we flick through Twitter and see, the way that our birds, our wildlife has just been knackered politically, physically, and every other measure you could imagine. But I took the approach that anger isn't the most healthy output.
yeah.
And maybe I could focus that into something productive, and that thing was and is Dubstep.
Yeah, and it is very productive. I mean, clearly you've earned a lot of money already for Operation Turtledove and planning to do more. And again, just to give a bit of context, the turtledove is not just a bird that's suffering in the UK. It's classed as vulnerable on the red list of global species. It's been classed as vulnerable since about 2015. It's still shown as being in decline, so it's not just in the UK. But what you're doing, Jonny, is fantastic, and fantastic support for Operation Turtledove. So I've got to extend my thanks, and anybody that's sort of into beautiful birds such as the turtledove, to extend your thanks to you for doing that. So if you could send one message to the government to say, right, okay, well, I'm doing my bit, and Operation Turtledove are doing their bit, and RSPB are doing their bit. Come on, guys, help us out a bit. For a start, don't be driving up to Durham to see a turtledove. That's not on. But what message would you send to the government to say, look, give us a bit of support here. This is what we need.
I would say that some things transcend 4-year periods. Some things are generational.
Yep.
It's no good declaring a climate crisis, in which I would include, our loss of species biodiversity, loss of species in of themselves, such as turtledove. You've got to, whatever colour you are, whatever part you are, you should be handing on that baton to the next one, and really prioritising that. Because when you've got over the recession, coronavirus, election cycle, whatever crap, the problem is still there, and it's still there for the next party, and it's still there for the next whoever. It's not something that should be forgotten. It should be prioritised in a way that, without getting too political, those key workers that have come to the fore, your teachers, your nurses, care providers and so on, they should be prioritised in the same way that wildlife should be prioritised, important habitats should be prioritised, and that should be across every government, as should education. You know, you're not going to get a better generation after this one if you haven't prioritised teaching and bringing forward, you know, a pretty open-minded, educated youth that value the important things, wildlife, getting out in the outdoors, and so on. You know, everyone knows it. Everyone knows you're going to feel better for having, you know, look about in the woods, on your nature reserve, along the river, whatever. It's common sense, you know. It just needs to be implicit and enshrined for every government.
Well, that's a fantastic message to send to the government. Maybe more of us should be sort of harping on about that. But for now, Jonny, thanks ever so much. Thanks for what you're doing for Turtledoves.
My pleasure.
Thanks for giving up your time today, and thanks for recommending we come here, because I've, as I said on an earlier video that I'm going to attach to this, I've actually just seen my first turtledove of the year, and hopefully we'll see it again on the way back. But for now,
yeah.
Oh, and before we go,
Yeah.
have you got a message for YOLO?
For YOLO? I just get inspired and shout at him on Twitter. No.
No, we're not going to tell him about the penguin that we saw around the corner there.
No.
No.
I've dropped a knacker here. He does owe me a northeastern red kite.
Oh, right.
I've still never seen a red kite in the northeast, and he promised me once he would show me one.
Did he?
Yeah. So I'm not saying you should use that to judge his character, but...
Well, yeah, a promise is a promise, you know, and I'm a bit disappointed in him, I must say.
Disappointed.
Thanks very much, Jonny.
Cheers.
Take care.